Hello. Take 3. Test. Test. It works. Okay. So, I thought I wanted to share more my top 10 Game of the Year list in detail here. And I thought, why not play Balatro while doing it? So, to jump right into things, my list, I will start with, I only have one dishonorable mention, and that is Multiversus. So, when Multiversus first came out, it was in like its beta. I really liked it, and there's a lot of Smash Bros. Likes out there, and they have varying degrees of success. But Multiversus is like the one game that appeared that, like, I really liked it. And I was having a lot of fun with it, especially since it was free to play. It felt like, for me personally, it firmly planted itself as like the number 2 spot, right behind actual Smash, like amongst the Smash clones. And I forget exactly what was going on at the time, but it kind of felt like the developers just didn't really, like, they weren't prepared for the success and how popular it would be. So I think there were some rough issues around that point, but like it was just so fun. And even thinking back, like, they were adding some characters, and like LeBron, even including Smash Bros, is probably one of my favorite characters within those Smash type games. So I loved Multiversus. Then it fell off the face of the map for a few months. And when it came back, I had a lot higher expectations for it that I guess it just didn't meet when it came out this year. I was hoping at the very least they would have added a lot of characters, but they didn't add as many as I would have hoped. It seems like the thing they focused on most was like the single player mode, which was kind of, it wasn't really worth it to me. And it was set up to be kind of like, how to say, like, it felt like a mobile game setup where it's like you do your dailies and then there's not really much reason to play beyond that. And I think they did kind of start listening to people and fixing parts of that, but like at that point it wasn't enough. It feels like they killed all their hype, and the new characters that were coming out, you needed to earn currency to unlock them, and I don't think they were even available to try in like the local multiplayer. And it feels like they made some changes to the gameplay even that might have made it feel not as good as the beta. It's almost like they took their several month break, and then Warner Brothers was like, alright, here are the things we can do to make this game give us more money, without really taking into account the quality of the game and the fun and everything that I liked about the beta. So that's enough about my dishonorable mention. Getting next into my honorable mentions, which is kind of like extended top 10 list for the most part, but I'll get into that. Starting with entry number 18. So at the bottom of my honorable mentions here, I have a couple games that I really wanted to give mention to, but for whatever reason I didn't really consider them a game that came out this year. So the first one is Elden Ring: Shadow of the Erdtree. So this is like a DLC that I really like, but I wouldn't really consider it a game that came out this year. And I still never beat Elden Ring, which is why when Shadow of the Erdtree was coming out, I was considering not even getting it at all. But around the time it came out, like, the boss you need to beat to access the DLC is the boss that it was basically the boss that stopped me from playing the game in the first place. Moog, I think his name was. And I tried to fight him. He was like the first boss in the game that I gave up just banging my head against trying to beat him because it felt like there was something I was missing. And there is an item you can get that you're supposed to be able to use against him. But shortly after that point, I kind of stopped fighting him and didn't pick the game up until the DLC came back out. At which point I did pick up I did pick the game back up, just trying to get back in on the hype, and while kind of reorienting myself with the game, I was just wandering around the area I stopped, and like I don't even think I was looking at the mini-map at that time, but I was just wandering around trying to reorient myself with the controls, and I stumbled across the one item that you can use against Moog. So I decided to go back to face him, and I think it took me like an entire day, but I was able to beat him at the end of the day. So at that point I was like, alright, well, I guess I'm just going for it now. And I got the DLC, even though I didn't beat the game, and I went for it, which I do really like the fact that the DLC comes with like its own progression system. So, like, regardless of how far you got in the original, everyone is more or less on similar footing throughout the DLC, which is pretty cool. And I know there was discourse about like whether the DLC is too hard, too easy, but like I didn't beat the DLC is one important point, but I really liked what I did play, and I did play a good chunk of it. And I really liked it. The best way I know how to describe it was basically it just felt like more Elden Ring, and I mean that in the best way possible. Like, the map, just a rough estimate, might be like half as big as the base game, but even then, I thought Elden Ring was and is still like one of the best games ever. And with the DLC just expanding its scope and doing all the things right that the original game did, like I feel like that just cements it as being amazing and something that's amazing to experience, and the sense of adventure and exploration that comes with it, and fantasy. It's just great, and I don't think there would be really any games that could stand up to it, aside from any other like whatever FromSoft is cooking up next, basically. But that was awesome. I only have one other game that's kind of like not included on my base list because it isn't a game that came out this year, and that's at number 17. That's Hades 2. So that is early access, and honestly, like, it's enough of a game that I could see people wanting to include it on their Game of the Year list. But like, I would rather just wait until the full game comes out next year or the year after, when it has the proper full 1.0 release. But as it stands, the early access started, I believe, with more content than the initial full 1.0 release of Hades 1. And because I hopefully will have a chance to talk more about this game in the future, I won't go into too much detail. Like, for anyone that hasn't played Hades 1, like, I would recommend just going back and playing that. That's a really good game. But for anyone that is familiar with Hades 1, like, I would say this is just everything I would want from a sequel to that. Like, it's just a great game that's really fun. Like, the music is great, the gameplay is great, the characters, the art is great. It's amazing. And the early access does have spots where, like, oh, this area was blocked off, or this character doesn't even have art yet. Yeah. I question how much I want to play the game before the full release, because I basically reached all possible endings for the early access version, and then I stopped playing. Then they released their first major content update, but I have not checked that out yet. So I might be in a spot where I do really want to play it, but if I can help it, like, I might just hold off until the full version of the game. But it's so good. Okay, on to my number 16, and this is where I kind of start my just expanded Game of the Year list. With the Jackbox survey Scramble. So, you know, I can try to not go on as much about these honorable mentions, but I still want to give them the time to talk about them and appreciate them. Jackbox survey Scramble, I feel like recently Jackbox has been putting some things out that have not really been like Jackbox party packs like they usually put out. It almost feels like they're experimenting with different formats of games, one of which is the survey Scramble, which is like a small handful of games that the gimmick is they constantly update the answers they use in the games based off the answers everyone is putting in while they're playing. So all of the answers are kind of like popularity votes from everyone that's been playing the game. I've played it a bit with my friends, and actually we played it twice, and the most recent time we played, we saw that they actually added, like, they originally had 4 game modes, I think, and they added 2 more, which I was surprised to see that. It's interesting. But yeah, our favorite game there was probably High-Low. Which, like, it gives you a series of prompts to choose from, or themes, and then once you start the game, there's a list of, like, the top 500 answers that people have provided. So on that list, you basically try to guess what the highest answers are, and then what some of the lowest answers are, which the lowest answers aren't necessarily, like, the worst or least popular answers. It's just the least popular within the cutoff of those top 500. So you kind of just have to think out of the box for, like, if the category is like cat names, then what might be a cat name that, like, only a couple people might have submitted? That might be a good low guess. Whereas the high guesses are like, what would basically everyone say is a good cat name? So yeah, it's like, even that mode alone, I feel like it really is like a game we could just play for a couple hours straight. I do worry that after our 2 sessions, we might have started to, like, run through a lot of the prompts they had, but it's still a lot of fun. So it's something I'd be willing to go back to. And like I said before, they had a few things they've added, a few game modes, so there's more value to be had there, at least until they tide us over until the next Jackbox. At number 15, I have Slice and Dice. So this is a game I discovered that came out on Steam this year, and I think this is kind of following up on my Balatro addiction. Like, I was just craving something else to fill that void after I unlocked everything in Balatro. But it's basically a game where you have a party of heroes that's represented by each hero is represented by 1 die, and each die is like, it has 6 sides, and basically you roll each dice to determine their action you take for that turn, and you have like 1 or 2 re-rolls, so if you don't like what they got, you can lock in what you do want to keep and then re-roll the others. But throughout the run, you can also, like, modify, like, what the sides of the die do, or you can also upgrade your heroes and across different routes to, like, change their die to do different things, and it's a lot of fun, and it's a highly rated game. I can see why. But just, like, the shenanigans you can get up to and the builds you can get, like, can end up being really fun. my favorite to go for was a build where like someone has a die that if you land on a certain spot, it gives you an extra roll. And to just keep trying to get as many rerolls as possible. And there are some passive upgrades you can get where like, even if you land on a side, it automatically does some damage to the enemy without you needing to actually use up a turn to attack. So if you combine that with the rerolls, it's kind of just like reroll as much as possible to do as much damage as possible. But the heroes and dice you play, as well as the enemies you face, like are all unique and use different different strategies and takes. The only downside to that game, I guess, is that I don't know, it felt like I always wanted to just go for that one type of build for maximizing rerolls. So yeah, I don't know, it didn't feel as streamlined of a game. Like, it was hard to tell what the ultimate goal of the game would be. I think I just made a silly mistake in Balatro. But Slice and Dice has a lot of content in it. It almost feels bloated, but I don't know, it feels hard to determine like what the ultimate goal is to play for, and it almost feels like something just to go back to and play for fun rather than try to meet specific goals. Although there are specific goals, I just like coming off of Balatro, it didn't have the same hook in me, but it was a lot of fun, and I really would like to go back and play it again at some point. Okay, number 14 on my list is Holo Break. This is a game made by KU, the same person to make Holo Cure, which I'm eagerly waiting for the time when I can put Holo Cure on my top 10 list when it fully releases its 1.0 version. But Holo Break is a different genre. It's a 2D, like 4-player classic style beat 'em up, and it's something I kind of played for one session with friends, and after that I don't see a lot of personal reason to go back to it. That being said, like it's still super impressive for a game made by mostly one person or a small team. And it's a fun beat 'em up with a lot of references to Hololive. There is one part of the game is just that. I might have doomed myself in Balatro. One neat part of the game is just that there's collectible stickers you can use as like emotes, and those stickers are drawn by like a ton of different fan artists from throughout the Hololive community. So that's really cool to see and like collect them all. It's just a really cool Hololive fan game that was made kind of in between Holo Cure updates, and I thought it was definitely worth a mention. At 13th place, I have Earth Defense Force 6, which this, I played a bunch of it, but I feel like I didn't play most of it, so I honestly feel like I don't have a ton to say about EDF6, because it really, like, kind of like the way I described Shadow of the Erdtree, EDF6 kind of just feels like more EDF to me. And, like, I'm not sure how best to describe it if you don't know what EDF is. It's kind of just dumb, silly fun. Like, you go and you fight so many giant bugs that you know you're gonna have a good time when the frame rates start dropping. But it's silly fun. Like, the dialogue is kind of like purposefully written to just be like stupid and funny, and like, it's not trying too hard though. It has this very cool charm that it's like the vibes of a PS2 game, but modern day, and it's just a lot of like silly, brainless fun. And from what I played, it was fun. I will say that a big part of me being convinced to get the game was just like there was like a HoloLive collab for an item you could use. You could throw out little decoys of HoloLive characters that would have various voice lines, and they're supposed to distract the enemies for you. But that's fun, and a game I would like to go back to at some point, but probably only with friends. Like, it's fun to play with people. Number 12, I have Metal Slug Tactics. So, this game also, I did not play a lot of. I played a bit of it back when it had a beta, and then I played like one full run when it released. And I'm a huge Metal Slug fan. I know, like, basically the biggest complaint I see about this game, because it seems like not everyone likes it as much as I do, is just that, oh, this is not a Metal Slug game, and why is it this genre of, like, real-time strategy, when what everybody likes about the Metal Slug games is that they're like run-and-gun action games. And I feel like from the start it's pretty obvious that this is made by like a different team, and it's just another fun spin-off. And personally, I feel like it's an interesting idea to play with. Like, just turn the hectic action of Metal Slug into a like turn-based strategy game like this, which I can't say I'm like a huge fan of these games, but I feel like I do like them, I guess. I just don't play them that often. And from what I have played of Metal Slug Tactics, it is like really fun, and it is something I want to go back to, because it seems like there's a lot of content you could get into and unlock, and just customize the run to play the way you want it to play. So yeah, there's a lot of unlockable content I haven't even touched yet. It almost just kind of felt overwhelming to me. So I haven't gone back to it yet, but it's definitely, like, it's just fun to have different characters that work different ways, set up different combos, and like a core mechanic of the game is kind of just like teaming up with your own characters. Like if you position yourself in a, like if you have one character in a spot where they would be able to attack an enemy, and then you have another member of your team actually attack that enemy, then that other teammate will follow up your attack with a free attack. And that's kind of like a big part of a lot of the characters' moves, is like just positioning yourselves and being able to follow up with each other and pull off these big combos. It's pretty neat. Number 11, I have Zenless Zone 0, which this is the point at which, like, this is definitely a game I did have on my top 10. It kind of got pushed off though. So I played a bit of Genshin Impact. This is by the same team, although it's kind of a different subgenre of the gacha. Whereas Genshin Impact was more like open world action adventure, Zenless Zone 0 is more of like a straight up action game. And I know a lot of people compared it to Devil May Cry, which I think was like one of my friend's biggest issues with it, is that it just didn't live up to that despite people's comparisons to it. I feel like obviously, like, the people who are comparing it to Devil May Cry either don't know much about Devil May Cry, or they do and like they're not comparing it for like the reasons, for like the depth of gameplay or anything. This is a game that is super stylish, and I think that's where a lot of the appeal comes from. But even then, like, I just feel like the gameplay is so much more satisfying and like really in-depth compared to something like Genshin Impact. So on a personal level, I like it way more in that sense. I also just like kind of the urban theme of the game, like compared to the like fantasy style of Genshin. This is like an urban setting with like a bunch of different species of furry people, but also normal people and like cyborgs and stuff. And it's just, I like the vibes a lot more. And the gameplay kind of focuses around like a parry system that, like, it's just so satisfying to pull off the parries, and that's a big part of the gameplay, where you kind of have a team of 3 characters, and then like at each parry you have, you can follow it up with your own attack, or like swap into one of your other 2 characters and they perform a follow-up attack that has various benefits. So like if you try to play the game in a way that's like if you try to play using only one of your 3 characters, that's really not the way the game was meant to be played. You're kind of meant to be cycling through all of them as much as possible and putting together a cool team synergy. And like, to step off of the gameplay, which the gameplay isn't like groundbreaking, but I really enjoy it. The visual aesthetics of the game are really nice. Like everything is animated with a lot of like soul, and everything's just really pretty. Story-wise, like normally I wouldn't really care about the story for a game like this. I have not played any of the recent story updates, but when the game first came out, I played through the entirety of the story that was available, and I have to say I did end up just kind of skipping through a lot of dialogue because there's just so much that I kind of just wanted to get to the next thing. But 100% there were parts of the story that like I was actually really getting into and I thought were well written, and I was starting to get invested in some of the characters. So it's rough because I kind of hit that soft gacha wall I get to with any gacha game where it's like I had fun progressing up to this point, but now it's kind of just doing the daily grind to slowly improve your characters and team until you can get to a point where you can challenge the harder difficulty stuff. But even then, like it's like I want the freedom to play with all the different characters I have and the new ones I'm getting, but they take even more resources than you have to like build up to the same point, and it's a lot, and it's not too satisfying to just try and grind through all of that stuff. But like I keep telling myself, like I don't feel the motivation usually to go back to it. But I really would at some point like to go back to it and just play through more of the story. Because I did really enjoy the bit I played. Okay, now getting into my actual top 10 list. My 10th game is Rabbit and Steel. So this is like a game I found on Steam. It is like a roguelike. Is that? I believe that's correct. You have different runs that you go for, but you can unlock different types of things. All the characters you play as are bunnies that are really cute. But the thing with the game is that it's like it uses raid mechanics from like a MMO like Final Fantasy XIV. So all the bosses you fight might be like the game is also 4-player, something that's important to note. So it might be like, for this enemy attack, you need to get as far away as you can from your teammates you're playing with. Another one might be you need to stick close together. Another one might be you all need to move into this zone, or certain players need to move into respective zones or certain sides of the screen. And it's just so unique. Like I don't have a ton of experience playing like raids and those types of games, or if any experience like that. But playing like a kind of, it's like a side-scroller shoot 'em up, kind of like Toho, but with the focus being on the raid mechanics that can accommodate multiple players. And I think the mechanics also change slightly depending on how many players you have. So it's just super unique. My biggest issue with the game is just that it's on Steam, and it's kind of a pain to like set up like the multiplayer and get enough controllers connected each time, but when we play it, it is a lot of fun. And I know the developers working on updates for the game, like with new stages to play in and new characters to play as. We haven't even unlocked all the characters that are available by default, but that's a game I would like to go back to in the future. And I also would love to see it just release on like consoles or something. I would honestly consider buying it again and starting progression over just to streamline the multiplayer experience that way. Number 9, I have Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. This game, it took me a bit of playing to kind of get what is so fun about it. But after playing a bit and getting to that point, I do feel like there's definite fun to be had in this game. And I am not, like, I can't call myself a huge Dragon Ball fan or anything. The biggest reason I got this game was just because of the nostalgia factor. The Dragon Ball Budokai Tenkaichi games were like such a big part of my childhood that I would play on like PS2 and play those with friends. That I was closely following this game before its release, and like one of its last trailers before release was really just like, it really hit me in the nostalgia, like basically saying everyone's here. And like they were revealing basically almost all the characters that were in the older games from like the movies and OVAs and stuff, and it was at that point that like I could tell that the people making this game just had so much love they were putting into it that I really appreciated it. And like that, I guess, was what convinced me at that point to get the game, because like I didn't want to pass up on that opportunity. I wanted to relive that part of my childhood, and I don't think that ultimately is what ended up happening. I don't know if I'm misremembering the old games, but it feels like there's so many mechanics in these new games that it's just kind of overwhelming and confusing. But if you put the time in to try to like learn how the game actually works, it's pretty fun to fight against both the computers and other players, I find. And then one of the biggest one of the biggest gimmicks, I guess, of the game is the single player mode, where it's basically a huge what if collection of stories where you play throughout kind of not the entire Dragon Ball story, but you follow kind of like the main plot points. But then along those main plot points, there are various diverging paths where like, instead of this happening, what if this happened instead? And then you kind of follow along a path of like continuing throughout the story if that one thing changed. So I played through kind of like the whole Namek saga, Saiyan and Namek saga, following all the different alternate path lines, which just navigating that all was pretty confusing at first, but like once I started to get the hang of it, I guess, like it's fun, and I do want to experience more, because even though I'm not like the most knowledgeable about the Dragon Ball storyline, like I obviously know through osmosis just like various details about Dragon Ball and what happens or doesn't happen. So to see specific points where it's like, oh, what if this happened instead? It's just neat to follow along and get to spend more time with the story and characters that way. Otherwise, like, there are some, like, I kind of wish navigating the menus was a bit more fluid. Like, I just have some minor gripes with the game like that. And just the way you can customize your character, like, it seems kind of limited in some aspects. So yeah, there's definite fun to be had there. I don't feel overly motivated to go back to it, but for sure there's, like, the whole thing with the Budokai Tenkaichi games is they're so full of content. Like, there's just so much there that you can definitely always go back to it at any point, and there's a lot there to experience and appreciate. And with this game, I think the effort they put in building the game definitely came across. My number 8 game. This is like, I did not beat this game, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. A big part of that was that I 100%ed the first area of this game. After that, I really wanted to play more of the original so that everything that was happening and being referenced in Rebirth, like, I wouldn't be left out in the cold on any of the references, just in case they were referencing anything beyond what I had already played in the original, because I had already played up to a point, like, past where I was in Rebirth. And there's a lot I experienced from the original that I really want to see how they handle that in Rebirth. So 100% yes, I need to get back to this game at some point, because the original Final Fantasy VII Remake was like one of my favorite games ever, if not for just the gameplay alone. So between that, my expectations, and what I did get to experience with Rebirth, is just, I really love the gameplay, and like, I just need to experience more of it. I'm just holding myself back because I want the full experience of the original, which is taking me time to get through. It's tough. I feel like I'm shooting myself in the foot here, not being able to experience the full thing, but someday, like, I still feel super motivated to get through both the original and Rebirth. I just need to get myself there, move myself across the finish line. But yeah, everything about Rebirth I was able to experience. I really like I really like the gameplay, and just the way your party interacts. Like, there was a part where, like, I had Barrett off of my active party, but your non-active party still kind of runs around in the open world and follows you around. And then there was a point where Barrett wasn't on my team, but he was still, like, occasionally shooting at some of the enemies. So it was like, that kind of just blew my mind, and it made me not, like, I can't wait to build the bigger party with the other characters have them all running around together and just being able to see like the entire party just together at the whole time and interacting in and out of combat. The game is visually beautiful, and there's a lot of content added, some of which can kind of just feel like bloat, I guess, but again, I really don't mind it. Like, even in the original remake, the stuff they added, I didn't care because it was just an excuse for me to play more, which I super enjoyed. In this case, it's the same thing, but like, one of the things they added is this card game that you can like follow along in side stories called Queen's Blood, and it's like a strategy turn-based card game against the computer opponents, and like, it came out of nowhere, but it's just so much fun, and even that alone, I just want to go back, play more, collect more cards, and like build an awesome deck and play tougher opponents and find more opponents throughout the world. I just really like it and want more of it. And I will get back to it someday. On my word. Okay. 7 and up are games that I would actually consider, like, I played and beat them and really enjoyed them. So, number 7, I put Marvel Rivals. This is like Overwatch 3, if you will. And I haven't played Overwatch in a while, but even I still think it's pretty funny, like how obviously a lot of this is just pulling straight from like the Overwatch I know. But like, aside from it being like the Overwatch hero shooter style, like, it's full of Marvel characters, that's always just been like such a big part of my childhood and my life. Like, with the MCU, I feel like it's been a big part of everyone's life. And I'm super happy to see this game do as well as it is. And I hope it, like, my experience with games like this is like Gundam Overwatch, which ends up getting shut down. So I really hope to see this be like a game that lasts like forever, or at least more than a year or two, and be successful and not get shut down. Yeah, I consider myself having beaten this game, quote unquote, because you can't really beat it, but I got the platinum trophy. I basically maximized all progression I can within this game currently. So I'm at the point where I really just want more content, more events, more challenges, more stuff to do. And the past few days I haven't really been playing it, although the couple weeks after it came out, I was pretty much addicted to it. Like, it's a ton of fun. And yeah, I guess one of the biggest differences between this game and Overwatch is kind of the team-up mechanics they have, where like each character has a bonus that they can activate if you're playing with a couple other characters. And I think I really want them to expand upon that in the future. Like, right now, each character has at least one team-up mechanic, but like, I would like to see, because each character has at least one, some have two at this point. In the future, as they add more characters, if they could build each character to have like 2 or 3 even, and just like leave more room for your team composition and the synergies within that. I'd really like to see that, and then build that up. More characters, more team up synergies, and I could see this being a game that I'd be willing to play for years if they just keep it alive and healthy, new content, new events, new characters, new maps. I would really like to see new maps as well, maybe even new game modes. But it's a lot of fun, and I'll always be willing to go back, especially to play with friends. Number 6 on my list is Astro Bot. So this is a game... this is a game that it didn't last too long. Like, I was able to beat it within like 20 hours or so, or 100% it even. There's just a couple hidden things I don't think I found, but as far as the game kept track of, I did 100% it. This is a game that excels on 2 fronts, I feel. The first part is that it's chock full of references to games throughout PlayStation's history, and I'm a sucker for those kind of things, so seeing them all together and just so many of my favorites, like, I don't even want to spoil any examples for anyone who isn't aware of them, but there's just so many things to see in this game, and seeing them all together, like at once, is really cool. It's also just, like, each reference they make to other things, you can tell there's effort put in, and someone behind each of those references that was a true fan of whatever is being referenced. Like, you could just, there's so much love that was put into it. You can tell for sure. The other part of it is that it's just a good, fun platformer that in and of itself almost feels like it's calling back to an age where games were a lot simpler and just made for fun, for the sake of the player. Like, on a personal level, it kind of reminds me of Banjo-Kazooie, which is not something this game references, whereas I could pull from something like Crash Bandicoot or Spyro, but it's fun. I don't know much what else to say. The reason I have it so low on my list, because I know it won Game of the Year at the Game Awards, is just that, like, if you take away, like, all of the references to the other PlayStation series, it would still be an amazingly fun platformer, but would it have been as big, and would I care for it nearly as much? Like, I kind of feel like I wouldn't, which is, I don't want to have to say that, but I feel like it's true. So, yeah, I guess that's kind of just where I stand with that. Is I super want this game to be as successful as it seems to be. I want more games to be like this, just streamlined fun, and not like full of any microtransactions, really. Ooh. Astro Bot is, like, everything about the game is just good. Like, it's a platformer which isn't too hard. You can kind of just turn your brain off and play through for fun. But playing through and finding all the secrets for 100% completion is a lot of fun. There are some parts of the game that do offer quite a bit of difficulty. The soundtrack is also super fun. Visually, like, there's always just so much stuff going on at the screen at any given time. Like, they're flexing the strength of the PS5 with just visual effects everywhere all the time. And mechanically, through the gameplay, that also, I feel, takes full advantage of the PS5, where you're constantly using the controller in different ways to do different things. Astro Bot. It takes full advantage of the PS5 controller, that you're always doing different things with all the different features it has, which is, it has a lot of different features, so it's cool to see those taken advantage of. It kind of reminds me of, what was it called? Returnal. I don't know if that game fully, or, well, yeah, that game took some cool advantage of the PS5 controller, and like the triggers, the trigger buttons being like, only pulling them down partially was like one command, then pulling them down all the way was a completely different command, which worked really well for that game. And that was one of my favorite games that came out that year. But Astro Bot, to summarize, is just a lot of fun. It's full of everything that make games fun. And I don't know, I just, like, if an Astro Bot 2 came out, I would love to play that. But I kind of hope it just, the sentiment of the love for this game is carried forward, and like other games within the industry just pick up on that style of make the game for the players, and you can tell at that point that the players are having fun, but so were the people who are making the game. I feel like I'm going to stop here actually and save my top 5. I will make that into a separate video or stream or whatever, but I feel like I'm running out of time here and want to just collect my thoughts for the other games. But I hope I was able to communicate my appreciation in full for all the other games I played this year, rather than just naming them off one after another while sharing my list with friends. But yeah, I was also able to just beat a round of Balatro, so I consider that a success. Alright, I will hopefully see people later if they watch to this point. Hopefully they will continue with my top 5. Alright. See ya!